Hey guys, so Miss Webster here. If you're watching this, it's because I'm not feeling well. I'm not able to teach face to face on Thursday and Friday. So if you're watching this, just know that if you need me, email me. I'll still be checking my email throughout the day. Sorry I can't be here, but I had to get my vaccine, y'all. So we're gonna be having a pretty short, easy day today. So last class, we talked about the Great Migration and the Harlem Renaissance a little bit. We're going to talk more about the Harlem Renaissance next class. But today, we're going to move on to Prohibition. Yeah, the Roaring 20s. So just take a second, pause this video. What do you think the word prohibition means? What does it mean to you? I'm kind of trying to break it down. The word prohibition has prohibit. Do we know what prohibit means? Shun is like the act of or time of prohibiting something. So hopefully you're following the directions and you clicked watch me first. So this is our video for the day. Then I want you to go down to the attendance tracker for Thursday and Friday. I want you to answer the question so I can do attendance. Then we have our warm-up. It is a question. What were the main causes of World War I? Remember, MAIN. Remember those four main MAIN causes. If you need to, always go back to your PowerPoints. I always keep that available for y'all. Now, next, we're going to run through our slideshow on prohibition, and then we have a prohibition reading and assignment. So you can either just follow along in this video or you can open it up, but it is there for your use. So we got the Roaring 20s and Prohibition and the birth of organized crime. Yes, this is the age of gangsters and Al Capone. So what are Americans doing? So we talked briefly last class about how we were seeing the shift from not just rural to urban, but rural to suburban, which is those outskirts of the cities, but still people are still moving to the cities. Urbanization, the act of urban moving to the cities, is still accelerating. So more Americans are finally living in cities than in rural areas. So in 1920, New York's population is 5 million and Chicago has a population of 3 million. So remember the difference between urban and rural. And they may or may not be true anymore, but some of these misconceptions still do persist today. So city life, cities were seen as impersonal. There were so many people there, you just blended into the crowd. Rural, you think innocent, small town, everybody knows everybody, nice, kind, that sort of thing. But post-World War I, farms started to struggle, and these lack of opportunities and the issues that came along with it caused 6 million people to move to urban areas. So urban life was considered a world of anonymous crowds, strangers, moneymakers, and pleasure seekers. Rural life was considered to be safe, with close personal ties, hard work, and morals. Wrong mouse. And particularly, life was changing in the 20s for women. So we were talking about the 1920s. The 19th Amendment has passed. Women are able to vote. And because of World War I, when so many men were drafted, many women entered the workforce and realized, hey, we like working more than we like being at home. We want the choice, So after the tumult of World War I, Americans were looking for a little fun in the 1920s. So war's terrible, people died, it's sad. We kind of see it now, actually. These people, everybody who's getting like tired of these unprecedented times, these having to adjust to a new way of living that's not so great, being restricted about what you can do. And even we've had a lot of death too. We kind of look towards the summer and seeing everybody vaccinated and moving on from COVID to having a good time again, you know? But for women particularly, women were becoming more independent and achieving greater freedoms. They had the right to vote, more employment, and they were also able to drive. So with this car, it also gives women opportunities as well. So a term you'll hear is the flapper, which challenged their traditional ways. It was a young woman, emancipated young woman who embraced the new fashions and urban attitudes. So emancipated, we learned during Reconstruction, means free. So a woman who's like freed herself from those traditional roles. There was a revolution of manners and morals, and everything challenged the traditional way of doing things, like, for example, needing a chaperone when you go on a date. It was considered improper for a woman to be alone with a man. Now, when we talk about these traditional morals and values, they are what we talk about. I'm going to say this for my fellow LGBT people. They're very heteronormative. They sort of rely on the gender binary rules for how women and men conduct themselves and how women and men conduct themselves with each other, especially in regards to like romantic situations. That's the rules that are being challenged. So when we talk about these traditional rules, remember we're mostly talking about that heteronormative cishet society. And there were new roles for women. Many women entered the workplace as nurses, teachers, librarians, and secretaries. They earned less than men and were prevented from obtaining certain jobs. And the American family was changing too. So by the 1920s, people were having less children, the birth rate declined, and we have the establishment of what would later become Planned Parenthood, which was the American Birth Control League in 1921. It was founded by Margaret Sanger. She was a birth control activist and founder of the American Birth Control League. And now marriage was based on romantic love and not, well, you needed to marry the guy who's got the best job or who has a farm that can sustain you. We're not seeing any courtships that are being set up by parents. Of course, it's still being encouraged by parents, but women were managing the household and as well as the finances. And here is when we really start to see the development of what we consider the concept of childhood. Children were not considered laborers or wage earners anymore. This is when what we recognize as public school becomes more prominent. And you'll see the development of different theories on childhood development, Vygotsky, Montessori, those sort of things. So people are starting to study children and see them as beings that they're not mini adults. They're in their own stage of development and they need different things than adults. So all of these changes kind of culminate in prohibition. So prohibition made it illegal to make, distribute, sell, or transport or consume liquor. So one example of the clash between city and farm was the passage of the 18th Amendment in 1920. the Volstead Act, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, went into effect in January 1920. It launched the era known as Prohibition. Prohibition lasted from 1920 to 1933, when it was repealed by the 21st Amendment. Now, this is easy to remember because 21st Amendment, you got to be 21 to drink legally. So, who was supporting Prohibition? So, reformers had long believed alcohol led to crime, child and wife abuse, and accidents. Supporters were largely from the rural South and the West. So, you're going to see a lot of it from what we refer to as the Bible Belt. The more religious a community is, the more likely they're going to support restrictions based on, what they believe is moral, based on their religious traditions. And here we have a group of women with a sign that says, "Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours." We have a Prohibition poster. It says, "Help me to keep him pure. Please vote against the sale of liquors." So, but when, just because something is against the law doesn't mean people suddenly give it up. We wouldn't have a court system if that was the case. So we have the development of speakeasies and bootleggers. Many Americans did not believe drinking was a sin, and most immigrant groups were not willing to give up drinking. To obtain liquor, drinkers went to underground, hidden saloons known as speakeasies. People also bought liquor from bootleggers who smuggled it in from Canada, Cuba, and the West Indies. And all of these activities became closely affiliated with organized crime. These activities, once performed by legitimate businesses, were taken over by criminal gangs, which fought each other for control with violence, including murder. Prohibition contributed to the growth of organized crime in every major city. And of course, the most famous example is Al Capone. He was from Chicago, Illinois, a famous bootlegger, also known as Scarface. And he made roughly $60 million a year in bootlegging alone. So Capone took control of the Chicago liquor business by killing off his competition. He had a talent for avoiding jail, but he was finally arrested and convicted on tax evasion charges in 1931. Racketeering, another big word, which is an illegal business scheme to make profit. Gangsters would bribe police or government officials, force local businesses to pay a fee for protection. So no fee meant they were gunned down or businesses were blown to bits. One of the most deadly days of this was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which happened on February 14th, 1920. It was a rivalry between Al Capone and Bugs Moran. Capone, he was South Side Italian gang, Moran, North Side Irish gang. There was a bloody murder of 7 of Moran's men. Capone's men dressed up as cops and gunned them down. So Prohibition eventually fails. Why? The government did not budget enough money to enforce the law. And of course, if there's nobody to enforce it, people are just going to do what they want. And gangs became so rich, they were often unable to bribe underpaid and understaffed law enforcement personnel and pay for expensive lawyers. And many citizens were sympathetic. because, they wanted their drinks. They had to get it from the bootlegger, so they're going to feel bad for them. The task of enforcing prohibition had fallen to 1,500 poorly federal agents. So 1,500 people, that's like if everybody at Northside Middle and then everybody at Azalea Middle had to police the whole country for prohibition. So by the mid-1920s, only 19% of Americans supported prohibition. Many felt prohibition caused more problems than it solved. So what problems do you think it caused? Let's pause here for a second and think about it. Then with the 21st Amendment, prohibition was finally repealed in 1930. And there we go. So we're going to move on to our reading. So pause here if you need to, and open up Prohibition Reading and Assignment. Okay, so I'm going to go to the Prohibition Reading and Assignment. We'll read it together, and then I'll read through the questions with y'all. So the assignment is what we're going to do next. We're going to go to the Prohibition PDF. What? Sorry, y'all. Internet. Okay, click. There we go. So, prohibition in the United States. There was a temperance movement in the early 1900s to try to stop people from drinking alcohol. Supporters of the movement felt alcohol was a leading cause in the destruction of families and moral corruption. President Woodrow Wilson gave momentum to the movement when he put an end to the manufacturing of alcoholic drinks during World War I. He did this to ration grain needed for food. On January 29, 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified. This made it illegal to sell or make alcoholic beverages like beer, wine, and liquor. This period was known as Prohibition. It was not illegal to drink alcohol during Prohibition, just to sell, transport, or make it. So many people still wanted alcoholic drinks despite the new law. People who made alcohol or smuggled it into cities or bars were known as bootleggers. Some bootleggers made and sold homemade whiskey called moonshine or bathtub gin. Modified cars were used by bootleggers to help them outrun federal agents trying to catch them. Some states refused to enforce prohibition. Drugstores still sold alcohol as medicine, and people could get it with a doctor's prescription. Speakeasies. Several cities established new types of secret establishments called speakeasies that sold illegal alcoholic beverages. They usually bought alcohol from bootleggers. Speakeasies became a major part of American culture during the 1920s. Thousands died from drinking tainted liquor. Yeah, so just for when y'all are older, do not ever drink moonshine. Because once it can kill you or go. There's an old saying, don't drink the moonshine because it'll make you go blind. It's not just a saying, it can really mess y'all up. So if you don't know where it comes from for any food or beverage, don't partake. So all of this led to organized crime. The sale of illegal alcoholic drinks became extremely profitable business for organized crime groups. Al Capone of Chicago was one of the most famous gangsters of all time. It is estimated that Capone's crime business made as much as $60 million a year selling alcohol and running speakeasies. During the Prohibition years, there was a significant rise in violent gang crimes. So then we have the end of Prohibition. Winemakers and brewers found ways to stay afloat during Prohibition. For example, Anheuser-Busch and Yuengling made ice cream, while Coors made ceramics and pottery. People started to realize that Prohibition was not working by the end of the 1920s. Americans were still drinking alcohol, and crime had actually increased dramatically during the time. Some other negative effects included people drinking stronger alcohol because it was cheaper to smuggle. There was a rise in the cost to run local police departments. In the early 1930s, the Great Depression began. People saw ending Prohibition as an opportunity to create jobs and raise money by taxing legally sold alcohol. The 21st Amendment was ratified in 1933, repealing the 18th Amendment and ending Prohibition. But Prohibition still continues in some parts of the country. So there can be local laws that say we don't sell alcohol. Each state and local counties and whatnot will make their own rules. For example, you'll see in Virginia ABC stores, that's where liquor is sold. Anything over a certain alcoholic content has to be run. It's run by a state store. But then, for example, my best friend lives in Indiana, and you can get liquor at the Walmart or their version of Walmart. So it's good. The laws still do vary from state to state, and there are some dry counties where they don't sell they don't sell alcohol. So now we're going to go to our Prohibition assignment, and I'll read through that. So we're going to use our Google Doc, well, the PDF, as it were. So, first slide. I'm going to define each term and explain how it relates to Prohibition. Number 1, Prohibition. Number 2, the 18th Amendment. 3, bootleggers. 4, moonshine or bathtub gin. 5, speakeasy. 6, Al Capone. 7, 21st Amendment. So define it and explain how it relates back to Prohibition. What part did it play? What was it? Etc. And we have a couple multiple choice. So choose the best answer. What was the main reason Wilson gave for ending the manufacture of alcoholic drinks during World War I? A, so troops would devote time to fighting instead of drinking. B, to ration grain that was necessary for food. C, he believed drinking was morally wrong. D, he did not want soldiers to have access to alcoholic drinks. So this can be found in the reading. Go back to it if you need to. 9, which completes the analogy? Bootleggers is to manufactured. Speakeasies is to A, banned, B, allowed, C, sold, D, secret. Modified cars were used by bootleggers to help them outrun federal agents trying to catch them. What is the best meaning of modified in the quote? A, adapted, B, exciting, C, antique, D, factory. And that's it for today. So fill this out, get your answers done, turn it in, and I will see you guys Monday, Tuesday.